May I have your attention, please? Somebody tap a glass, please. Tap a glass. Enough fun. It's time to go to work. Good. I'd like to start by having a show of hands. How many of you, and my hand goes up first, have ever been an employee of a Citigroup entity? Okay, that's about half the audience. How many of you have done business with Citigroup, whether you've worked there or not? That's the other half. I think it's amazing, and I'm sure that Mr. Weil knows that you could do this in any group in the world, in almost any market, internationally or domestically, and that would be the case. Bill Spencer, when I worked there from 1970 to 1976, and Bill Spencer, who was president of the bank at that point, came back from a trip to Italy one time, and he said, I met somebody who never worked at Citibank. And we all said, no, we never met anybody who never worked at Citibank. And we said, who was it? And he said, the Pope. Anyway, I went there in 1970, and just as the bank was opening its doors to women, the first week I was there, they passed around a notice, which I thought was interesting, saying that they had pored over the books and discovered that there was no rule that women could not visit the senior officer's dining room, but that for some inexplicable reason, there just didn't happen to be any women senior officers. But that at the time there were some, they were welcome in the dining room. So that was the atmosphere. They were doing their best, and it was wonderful. So it really is a joyful thing for me to introduce Mary McDowell today, who will introduce Sandy Weil. Mary is a very senior woman at Citigroup. She is the president and chief operating officer of Citi Financial, with responsibility for managing the 2,300 branch network, including branch operations in the United States, Canada, and Puerto Rico. Mary joined Citibank in 1991. And has had every job in the bank, best I can tell. I could read for a long time here. She was born in Cameron, Texas. She graduated summa cum from Texas A&M. Any Aggies in the crowd? And she is a certified public accountant, a chartered financial consultant, and a chartered life underwriter. She and her husband live in North Texas. I give you Mary McDowell.
Thank you. As someone at the table said, it's a good thing she said senior leader, not senior. Well, thank you. I am just extremely pleased and proud to be here today to introduce to you one of the true titans of industry. Sandy, I think, has just had an amazing career. As many of you know, he started out in 1960 with $30,000, started a securities firm, and over the years parlayed that into the largest financial services company in the world, Citigroup, and along the way became probably one of the best known businessmen throughout the world. And you know, as with any career, his career had ups and downs. And in the time frame when he sold his securities firm to American Express, of course, he had a little bit of a personal setback, as he describes in his book. But that turned out to be one of the best things that could have ever happened in his career. And I'm going to read just a little segment from the cover of the book. Quoting, it says, "Undaunted, Sandy cannily parlayed it into a second career, starting over with a sleepy consumer loan company called Commercial Credit, which over the next 17 years he transformed into the leading global bank, Citigroup. During this span, Weil, as chairman and CEO, delivered an astounding 2,600% return to investors, better than legendary CEO Jack Welch or investor Warren Buffett during that same period. Pretty astounding," unquote. And I'll tell you, as the current president of Citi Financial, which is the former Commercial Credit that Sandy started with, it's not a sleepy little loan company anymore. The intro said 2,300. I think we're almost up to 2,500 now, and we have about 36 billion in assets, and we make around $1 billion a year. So it's really come a long way, Sandy. And my team and I every day know that we carry the mantle for that. In reading Sandy's book, I just jotted down a couple of things that really resonated with me. I was really struck by the optimism and perseverance that Sandy showed throughout his career. When the chips were down, he really came back and made something out of it. One page of the book, Sandy talks about how his mother's has this unbelievable knack for memorizing and calculating figures, which he believes he inherited. He goes on to state that to this day, I can manipulate numbers in my head with ease. Let me tell you, if you have ever worked with and around Sandy Wall, you know that to be the case. If you ever had a meeting with Sandy, you had to make sure, boy, you were prepared, because let me tell you, he not only could remember numbers, could be there way before you were there. He asked just amazing questions, so he always really kept you on your toes. So, Sandy, I'm going to tell just a little personal story here. Way back in my days of my early career, I had a budget meeting with Sandy. Bob Willemstadt and Marge Magner, who were formerly with the company, were there, and they wanted to give me a little portion of the program. We had like this 100-page presentation, you know, which we were presenting to Sandy. Of course, you don't go page by page, you go little piece by little piece. And I had my piece of this, which was maybe 5 pages, and I know how great Sandy is with numbers and figures and asking those hard questions, so I worked, and I worked, and I worked. And man, I'm going to know any question that Sandy asked me. So here we are on this day. I think it's going pretty darn well. I get to the part where I'm supposed to present to Sandy, and he is so amazingly interested. He's sitting there in the chair. He's leaning forward. He's leaning forward a little more, and I keep going. I'm thinking, this is going really great. And you know what? Any question he asks me, I'm going to be really prepared, because I know this backward and forward. And Sandy says, I can't understand a word you're saying. Can you talk like a New Yorker? Now, with my Texan accent, you know, it was a little bit difficult, but I'll tell you, Sandy, I think as many people as you talk to across the country and across the world today, I like to think that maybe I helped you in understanding non-New Yorkers in some way. So one of the things, again, in his book, he talks a lot, is his love of philanthropy. And I have to tell you, it's such an astonishing life that Sandy has led, even through the business world and through philanthropy, that he himself says that he went from a mediocre bass drummer in my high school marching band to the chairmanship of Carnegie Hall. So with no further ado, let me bring to the stage the real deal, a truly incredible man, Sandy Wall.
Thank you. Good work. You got it on? Well, we'll find out in a minute. Good afternoon. I'm David Johnson, as they were saying earlier, and a lot of you know me locally from NPR and KRLD and Channel 8 and everything else, but for 34 years, I have called this gentleman boss. When I was Smith Barney. Don't stop. Please have a seat.
Okay.
Good to see you. We say that for disclosure purposes. Also, we'd like to welcome the folks from C-SPAN who are in the back of the room. We say that because we want to welcome them, but also in case during the Q&A period, any of you have been afflicted by Tourette's, you should be aware that the world is going to find out. So we've got about 50 years worth of corporate life here to start with, but you know, we're in the world affairs. We're talking about world affairs, and this is the group, so that's probably the best place to start, because you seem to have a world view of financial markets and corporate life long before anybody else. I mean, I think this was part of the idea of hooking Shearson up with American Express and certainly through Citi. Is it working? I mean, it's a tough environment. They play by different rules.
Well, I think that really the world has changed dramatically since the collapse of the Berlin Wall, and the American system of capitalism is something that's been copied in countries all around the world. So I think we as Americans are very lucky that our system is the one that countries are using. We've seen the development of businesses in emerging market countries everywhere. When you think about last year, the two countries that had the biggest increase in the GDP were the two leaders of the communist system 20 years ago, Russia and China. And here their economies are growing enormously. And so I think that the fact that goods and services are going to be manufactured or delivered in the place that can develop a quality product and deliver it in the most cost-effective way is a good thing. I think it's a good thing because it's being able to grow economies. We're growing middle class in a lot of countries around this world. And if people don't see where they have an opportunity to improve their standard of living in what we are doing together in the globalization of a world, they're not going to like this world. And I think the big risk is that happening. I think the big risk is from terrorism, which we see happening, where people can feel that they have no chance here. They get led up a mountainside, they get brainwashed, they come down and blow themselves up and blow a lot of people up with them. So we have to figure out how do we bridge this cultural divide between religions, between people from different parts of the world. And so I spend a lot of my time working on that. If you think of the Old Testament and the New Testament and the Koran, there are many more similarities than there are differences. And we should get people to work on thinking about those similarities and the good parts and making everybody really feel part of the same family, rather than thinking about the bad examples and creating ways where people don't get along. So,
on a corporate side, IT&T was always a major factor in South America, but it seems like about every decade they'd come along and have all of their investments wiped out. There'd be a change of dictators, or the inflation would come along, and it really scared off the rest of the U.S. corporations that seemed to want to invest outside. But there seems to be...
Well, it didn't scare off the banks. They all nearly got wiped out in the 80s.
And then would back up again and everything else. But I was going to say, it seemed like the banks may be the door openers, too.
Well, our company, Citigroup, has been in a lot of the companies in Latin America now approaching 90 years. So that's a long, long time. And some of the countries in Latin America are doing phenomenally well. And hopefully the election, for example, in Mexico that just recently happened will be a wake-up call to that business community that they have to work with the governments together to get the kinds of reforms that will create a better life for a lot more people. And that country will have a heck of a good chance. I think the same thing in Brazil. And we don't want to see what's happening, what happened in Cuba and what's happening in Venezuela, or the kind of government that we've witnessed in Argentina, which basically stole the assets of people to devalue their currency. We don't want to see that happen again.
You bring up an interesting point, though, about the outsourcing that is creating a middle class that has never existed before in Mexico, and I gather it's growing to some degree in India and every place else that this business is doing. But I guess you're also creating a bunch more consumers.
Well, I think that's right. You are creating consumers. When you think about the outlook for the U.S. economy today, it is benefiting from the fact that France and Germany are doing better. It's benefiting from the fact that Japan is doing better for the first time in a dozen years. It's benefiting from what's happening in China and India and a lot of other countries in Asia and other parts of the world. that are interested in our products. And when you talk about outsourcing, that's another thing. A lot of the jobs that have left the United States were jobs that Americans don't want to do. You know, they're not interested in being in call centers. They get bored with answering the phone all the time, and you know, and customer service. And those jobs maybe are better someplace else.
Well, and also, I gather in the outsourcing, there are a lot of goods that are produced abroad that come back here. They're produced less expensively than we can produce them, and consequently, you create a standard of living here that is elevated because everybody can afford to go to Walmart.
I think you've seen here in Texas the benefits of NAFTA, which a lot of people were against, thinking that all the jobs would go to Mexico, and basically it helped Mexico, but it also helped the United States.
Yeah, I think we remember somebody referring to a giant sucking sound. I can't remember who that was.
Do you still hear it?
Not quite like I used to. Not quite like I used to. Well, so it would be very logical then to you know, on a corporate side, to create, you know, a multinational corporation like Citi that was prepared to come along at the same time that communications opened up and outsourcing and insourcing and in-migration and out-migration came along. How did you, but you approached Citi.
Right.
When you were at, so you had Travelers, you had Smith Barney.
Yeah, our company was called Travelers. Smith Barney was part of it. We, I think, were building one of the best or the best financial services company in America, but the world was going global and we didn't have the outreach to really put together what was happening in the whole world, and it would have been very difficult to do that a step at a time. We were really a little bit late. So we were trying to figure out how do we go and build this company. And I knew John Reed for about 30 years. We had worked on a project together. We were both on the board of a company that was going bankrupt, and you really get to know somebody when you work on something like that.
Yep.
So I called John, and we made a date, and we agreed to get together in my hotel room after a dinner that we were both going to of the Business Council. So he came up to my room, and I offered John first a glass of wine to be hospitable. He said no. I offered him a Coke. He said no. I offered him a glass of water. He said no. I said, this is going to be an interesting meeting. I said, John, let me tell you the bottom line of why I wanted you to come up here and what I wanted to talk to you about. And if you think there's any interest, we can go further. I said, I think our companies should merge. We both have the same equity. We would have the strongest financial company of any in the world. So when there were the next problems, we can use that problem as a way to take advantage of it rather than being hurt by it. We would have all the products, and we would have all the distribution. It could be a phenomenal thing. And he looks at me and said, you know, I agreed to see you because I thought you were going to ask me to buy a table at a charity dinner. Honest to God. And because I respect you so much, I was willing to take a $25,000 table. And we're talking about $100 and some odd billion deal. It was the biggest thing that had ever been done in any business. But he says, sounds like something that maybe we should look at. Let me go home. I'm going to see my wife, and I'll be back tomorrow morning for the morning meeting. We can get together again. And he decided, let's pursue it while he was away. And he had your friend Paul Collins call me, and we did this deal in 3 weeks or 4 weeks without any leaks. It was the day that we announced it, our stocks went up about $18 billion in market value.
It was a win-win. Both stocks went up, right?
Oh yeah, both, yeah.
Invariably, one goes down and one goes up, but not this one.
No, they both went up, like a lot.
Yeah. But you
and
know,
then went down, both.
So did he buy a table?
Pardon me?
Did he buy a table?
Yeah,
I know you had one to sell him.
We didn't get around to that.
But you know, it occurs to me that the climate isn't always right for something like that. There was a fellow here that many of you remember, Jim Ling, who had LTV. And it was, you know, it was Braniff, and it was Wilson Sporting Goods and Meat Manufacturing and Jones and Laughlin Steel. And then finally the government...
How about my meeting Jimmy Ling and Omega Alpha?
Oh yeah, well
It should have been Omega Omega. The end is the end.
That was on the backside of that. And in fact, I remember that story. But they, the government went in after him and broke him up because the approach was bigness is badness. And there's just, you can, it doesn't matter that you're not integrated. You can just be too darn big.
Well, I think that obviously when you talk about a global economy, you can't just talk about what affects your own home country. It has to be, how do you become effective and how do you compete in a global environment?
Right.
And so we have to have companies that can be the low-cost producer, that can deliver the best quality product and can have the size and the diversity to compete with companies that are headquartered in Europe or headquartered in Asia or wherever they're headquartered. It is not just what's happening in Texas or New York or California anymore.
How do you keep up with something like that? I mean, all these different...
You gotta love it.
And I guess you got to be able to delegate real well.
Yeah, but we have like 270,000 people in our company, so you have to be able to delegate, and you have to be able to, or you have to really rely on the fact that the people that are working with you are going to do the right thing, and they're going to be ethical, and they're going to understand that you are trying to run a company that what you earn is what you're really earning.
Can you communicate with 270,000 people?
I think so. People said that when we first merged with Citigroup that people in foreign countries are different than Americans. They don't care about stock options, and they don't care about getting part of their compensation in stock. And I found out that that was really a lot of baloney. They have exactly the same aspirations and dreams in the Philippines or Korea or Turkey as they do here in the United States. And why shouldn't they? And I think that if you're willing to invest the time and energy to go and speak to people, and speak to people really in different countries and all over the world, you're going to learn a lot about what you do. So I happen to be blessed in the fact that I never learned how to use a calculator. I don't know how to use a computer. I don't have a BlackBerry, and I don't do email. So I had to do it. So I had to learn how to do this by walking around the halls and speaking to a lot of different people. And it's amazing how much you can find out by speaking to people that are really dealing with the customers, what the customers really want, and not what people that are your direct reports are necessarily telling you. And so for me, it was a fantastic experience.
And so the equity ownership is a way to literally buy into the company, to have a bond and have a stake in it. And
I think that's absolutely true, including, from the receptionist or the person in the back office all the way up and down. Everybody in our company participated in it, and the senior management of the company was not allowed to sell any of their stock at all that they got from exercising stock options or restricted stock until they retired. So we were all forced to make more money than we ever would have made. I mean, every one of us would have been like other people, You exercise stock, you sell it, you buy a Ferrari, or you buy a big house, or you buy a boat, or you do this or that, and you waste it, you invest in another company that's not nearly as good. We had to keep it. And now we got to figure out how to give it away.
Golden handcuffs. I like that. I like that. Another theme that comes through, you mentioned it here, and the theme comes through clearly in your book, is your wife Joni's name is probably, if it's not on every page, it's about on every other page. And every time you were doing a deal or contemplating a shift, I mean, going back to, what was it, corned beef with lettuce, CBWL that you had. But I mean, you always went back to seek her counsel or advice, or she was in meetings, and it seemed like you always wanted to meet the spouse of whoever you were linking up with. I
did, because and my wife and I would meet with the couples when we're thinking of hiring a senior person, because she is a much better listener. I was trying to sell the person why they should come to our company and not really listening to what was going on. Well, my wife, listens and with very good judgment and was very, very helpful. But we've had a partnership for 51 years, and it's a phenomenal partnership. And we've been very helpful to each other. At the beginning, I was a shy person, and she was much more outgoing. And she worked on my developing self-confidence and respect for myself and encouraging me to make calls to potential clients because we had to pay the milkman and we had to pay the diaper man and we had a lot of those issues. So at the beginning, she encouraged me to do more. And the last part of my career, she would say to me all the time, down boy, get real. So we've had a very balanced kind of life.
And you always seem to want to include families in gatherings. I remember as stockbrokers, and there was a Smith Barney thing. It seemed like the spouses were always included, which wasn't necessarily true other places.
Well, but just think. I mean, this world doesn't go in a straight line, and the emotions go up and down, and especially in a business, in a financial business, or I guess in most businesses, and when that partner is going to come home at night and they're very aggravated or they're on a high, it is very good for their spouse to understand, what is causing this, and the spouse can be a much better partner. And from the company's point of view, you end up with two people in the house that are supporting the company and what they're doing rather than one that knows nothing about it. So we included spouses in strategy planning and what we're going to do in advertising and lots of things. And that really is not done much in corporate America, and I think it's not smart.
No, but it makes a lot of sense.
We did it overseas too, where it was completely unheard of. Yes, and it was great.
That is, and she must have been.
I mean, I have, for example, a friend of mine who worked with me at Citigroup is now the Prime Minister of Pakistan. And we had dinner with he and his wife a few months ago when they were in New York, and she was talking about the times when she came to our house in Greenwich in the fall of the year, and we have about 100 apple trees, and we'd have people from the company and their kids, maybe 300 or 400 kids and clowns and whatever. And she was talking about apple picking. Here is the Prime Minister's wife in Pakistan with all the problems that are going on there with the Taliban and Al-Qaeda, and she remembers apple picking. That makes the world smaller. It makes it easier to relate.
It makes it a lot easier, I would think. And it must have, Joni must have been a great source of comfort to you, because that period, for the world financial markets and the stock markets and everything else, sort of on the other side of Y2K, just fell apart. The stock market just dropped like a rock. I don't know that the NASDAQ's ever going to get back where it was.
Never say never.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking
they'll have a new index.
That's why, an adjusted index. That's where you could change the rules. And happily the Dow is. But what a terrible period. So many people lost so much money. And then,
right.
and then the acts of terrorism and 9/11, and then Sarbanes, and then Oxley, and then this guy Eliot Spitzer, I've heard of.
Right. My next governor.
I won't buy a table for that one.
Well, you never can tell. Don't say never.
What are we through that though? Because it seemed like, and I'll go to Sarbanes-Oxley, because I guess Sarbanes-Oxley is one of the buzzwords of corporate America that everybody hates, and small companies seem to find it a tremendous financial burden to comply with that. But it almost seems like it's a reaction to the pendulum being way over here. Having swung too far.
Well, I think that's true, but that's happened so many times in the past where you have a good kind of environment that leads to excesses. It leads to some people that think they can game the system, and then frauds surface, and people lose money. In this case, also, it led to the blurring of the Chinese wall between research and investment bankers in the securities business. And after the fact, and then the markets went down after a 20-year, 18-year bull run from 82 to 2000.
Exactly.
And people lost a lot of money, so Congress is going to react to that, and they're going to create new regulations. And usually the new regulations are going to go too far in the other direction, like the excesses went too far in that direction to correct it, and then it'll eventually come back into some kind of balance. And I think that what you're seeing now is thoughtful people talking about whether this country of ours is going to be competitive in the marketplace. We saw the biggest IPO ever with a Chinese bank, and that was done between Hong Kong and London with no offerings here in the United States and no listing in the United States. So now Hank Paulson, the new Treasury Secretary, is talking about things that may have to be changed. The SEC is talking about some things that may have to be changed. Dick Cheney yesterday talked about changes that may have to happen. So I think that there is, and my guess is a year or two from now, you will see some of those things in Sarbanes-Oxley that will be different than what they are today, that eases things but doesn't let things get out of the box. And then we'll go for a period of years with a balanced regulatory environment. And a regulatory environment is very important in business. And then again, eventually there'll be excesses and of some other kind.
The cycle just plays out.
Play out again. I mean, that's the way life goes.
But you know, you're right. There was a remarkable thing down here, and some of you may have seen this, but the Duke of York was in town, I guess, 3 weeks ago. Prince Andrew also does.
You don't have those same issues with Sarbanes-Oxley.
No! And in fact, what I witnessed, he was standing up in front of a group. There was a big convention there on nanotechnology. And he was standing up in front of this group of budding entrepreneurs who had these little companies want to go public. And he said, and what he was saying very directly was, come here. Mm-hmm. You don't have to file 4 times a year. You file twice a year. You don't have to file papers like this. It's an 8-page document. And if you have trouble here, the London Stock Exchange is a wonderful place to do business.
Maybe owned by NASDAQ.
Well, that's right. Maybe it's acquisition minded. Right. But so you're not out buying stuff and managing things right now. Is your life mostly turned to your foundations and Carnegie?
My life right now is basically spending a little more time with my grandchildren, which is more important to me than to most of you out there. My grandchildren, that is, not your own. But my wife and I are spending a lot of time on philanthropy. Between the two of us, we are chairs of 5 not-for-profits. I've been chairman of Carnegie Hall for 17 years.
You rebuilt Carnegie Hall, right?
A lot of people rebuilt Carnegie Hall.
Well, but you were the one, if memory serves, who raised the money and gave the seed money and
helped. Yes.
There was a movement to rename the place after you, I think. I think there was a movement to rename, but go ahead. I don't mean to interrupt.
But it's become a passion of mine, and I think one of the things I like is the fact that music is really a universal language, and it is a way to bridge gaps between different cultures. And there isn't a heck of a lot of music education in schools today, and so we have developed major education programs to reach into the public schools and also to bridge the gap with cultural institutions around the world. I've been chairman of Weill Cornell Medical College for about 10 years now, and we've done some of the things that I worked on doing in business. We've gone global in that we 5 years ago worked on building a medical school outside of Doha in Qatar, which is now in its 5th year. It's 2 years of pre-med and 4 years of medical school. It's co-ed classes in the Middle East. It's all young people from the region. They have to pass the same exams for the pre-med courses they would to get into Cornell University in Ithaca. And then they have to pass the same MCATs to get into the medical school. And last year, with our 2nd year medical class finished, the kids in Doha did a little bit better than the ones in New York, which is phenomenal. And they look at us, and those people there look at us, that that Americans are really good people. After we did this, 9/11 happened, and the Iraqi War happened, and because we had the guts to move to the Middle East when nobody else did, and we give a Cornell University degree, MD degree, when these young people will graduate. Texas A&M agreed to build an engineering school there, which they've done. Carnegie Mellon has built the School of Computer Sciences there. Georgetown is now going to build a School of International Studies. The Rand Corporation has gone there. And none of them would have done it had we not been the first. We're working on the development of a medical school in Tanzania, Bugando, Tanzania, where there's 1 doctor for every 30,000 people. The average life expectancy in this day and age of ours is only 42 years. There is no education for women in birth control and early childhood diseases is what the problems are, much more than just AIDS. We also developed a relationship. We've gone national now in that we are the medical school of Methodist Hospital in Houston after they got a divorce from Baylor, and they approached us. And we're just doing a lot of the same things that were always done in business, this time in medical education and research and healthcare delivery. And we're just announced a $1.3 billion new campaign for that medical school. I'm taking too much time, but I really believe in this stuff. And I'm also chairman of an organization called the National Academy Foundation, which has 3 different programs, one in financial services, one in travel and tourism, and one in information technology. We have lots of high schools in Texas that are part of our program. We've gone from one school in New York 25 years ago. We're now in 525 schools in 41 states and the District of Columbia. Last year, over 90% of these kids graduated. These are all inner city schools where the graduation rate is under 50% in comparable programs. Over 80% of them went on to college. We have over 2,000 companies that support our programs locally and give the young people summer internships where they see that education is going to be the key that's going to unlock the door to their financial future, and there is something beyond that entry-level job. We just got support a few months ago from the Gates Foundation with a major grant to help us expand our infrastructure, which I'm really excited about. And next year we hope to start an engineering program where when you think about people in a career, and this is a great career in the United States, less than 15% of the engineers in the United States are women, and a very small percentage of the engineers come from a diverse part of our population, and that's really all these kids that would be in our school. So that's what I do. My wife is the chairman of the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater, which just built the biggest building just for dance in the United States. It's a terrific organization, and they are great cultural ambassadors for this country. This troupe travels overseas, I think, more than any other cultural organization in the country. And she's also chairman of Paul Smith's College of the Adirondacks, which specializes in forestry and ecology and programs like that. So we try and help in a place where we have a little retreat. And she's now thinking of trying to start a nursing school up there and attract more women to that part of the world, which I think would be good. So with that and a bunch of other boards that we're on, it's a full-time job, and it's fun. And as I was talking about with Garland, it's not easy to figure out how to give away your money in something that you really care about. And to me, philanthropy is not just money. As a matter of fact, it's just a small part of it. I think it's really about your time, your energy, your brain power, your passion for something, and convincing companies to do that more, convincing companies to encourage their employees to do that. They're going to become better employees. If they do that, the company is going to be more respected if it helps out in its communities in which it works. And it's important in America, spreading that message around the world that we can't just rely on governments for social services or even maybe sometimes for foreign policy, that there has to be closeness, a connectivity between individual people in this country, in our country, and in other countries when the governments don't get along.
It's interesting. A lot of wealthy, a lot of successful people lend their names to lots of causes. Hearing you speak about them, it's clear you know every facet of everything that you're involved in. But how do you do it? Because
I'm not sure that the heads of these organizations that I work with are so happy about my retirement.
How do you do it, though? Because what I hear now, the life of a CEO of the year 2006, of a corporation of any significant size, is a 7-day job. It's 18-hour days. It's breakfast in New York, dinner in London, on to India the next day, and the argument is they can't get involved. They'd love to, but they just can't. They don't have time to get involved. The demands are too high.
Well, I'll tell you, I think that's a lot of baloney, because what I found is the busiest people are the people that have time to yet do one more thing. And it's the people that do have time to do things that are not necessarily those that you want to use. So, I worked 24/7 when I worked at Citigroup, and basically worked for 50 years, not ever sleeping on Sunday night, worrying about who's going to do what to whom the next week, or what person in our company is going to do something really stupid. And now for the first time I can sleep on a Sunday night.
Well, and reading your book, you had plenty to worry about. I can tell. It was what a fascinating period. Look, and we've got a lot of busy people here too. I know who have work to do, but I know you've also got questions for Sandy Wild. I know it's a unique position. We've got one here and one back here. Microphone. Please, some questions. We'll extend this interview out a little bit. Hands?
You just sent everybody home.
Peggy?
International acquisitions. Is Citigroup going to be buying companies overseas more? Are we back on that track again? Or how do you feel about that?
Okay. Basically, let me say that I'm talking and answering it as a civilian, and what I read in the paper, because I haven't been involved in the management of the company for 3 years. I think that if a CEO passes the mantle to another one, you should really get out of the way and let the person do it, or else you're going to smother that person and they're not going to have a chance. Having said that, I hope that that's going to be the case. We just announced that we're buying a 20% interest in a bank in Turkey. I know the people in Turkey that own that bank, and they're really terrific, and I think we're much better off owning 20% of something that's the best in a place that has a different kind of culture than owning 100% of something that you may not know how to manage. Citigroup also last week announced that they were buying the biggest credit card company in Central America. So they are doing some things, and I think the best thing we've ever done was buying Banamex down in Mexico, which when we bought it, it was making $800 million a year, and last year it made about $2 billion, with about 26% of the.
And you didn't rebrand that, did you? Is that Citi, Banamex/Citi, or?
No, Banamex rebranded us. Basically, Citibank Mexico became part of Banamex.
So you kept the name. I guess that's an important thing.
It was the National Bank of Mexico at one point in time. It was the one that printed the currency. They do speak a different language.
Right.
But the managers that we have in that business, they're now training a lot of the managers that are leaving Mexico and going to work for Citigroup, all in different countries around the world. I mean, really, really good management.
That's good. That's good to hear. How about back here?
Besides your wife, who are your personal heroes currently?
Besides my wife. Thank you. But let's just say that she's my biggest personal hero. I loved a person by the name of Isaac Stern, who was the president of Carnegie Hall, and we got to be very close over a 20-year period. And he was a person that, to me, was really a very big person, very brave, creative, and willing to be a risk taker. So he would be one of my personal heroes. My personal heroes are all people I know, because that's the only way I might be able to really say. I think one of my personal heroes is President Ford, who had the guts to pardon Nixon when this country was, tearing itself apart, knowing that that was not going to be a politically astute thing to do. And now, 30 years later, people are saying that what he did was really the right thing for the country at that point in time. So I think that that's pretty good. My daughter, is a personal hero of mine, and that she had a very tough time with me being her father and working in the same company, and she left this company and she ended up about 4 or 5 years ago starting a financial services company called National Financial Partners, and then taking it public, listing it on the New York Stock Exchange. It now has a market cap of $1.5 billion. So she is one of my heroes. And if anybody knows her, please tell her I said that.
That's Jessica. How about a couple more?
What's your assessment of Citi since your departure?
What's my assessment of what city? Of Citigroup?
CITI, I guess, instead of CITY.
I think Citigroup is a phenomenal company. I think it has a position that's been unwavering in a lot of emerging market countries around the world, and one just can't replace by what you do in 2 years or 5 years or 10 years the fact that a company has been in foreign countries through its development and its problems over the last 100 years. We've been able to build a position where we are the largest investment banking business, the #1 in investment banking, debt and equity of any of the companies in the business over this recent period. So I think the company is in terrific shape.
Back here.
Against the background of 9/11, I'd appreciate your comments on how you feel our banking and financial system is in terms of safety and security.
Okay. You know, when you think about 9/11 and the closing of the exchanges and whatever, I think the Federal Reserve, did a phenomenal job in keeping their lending windows open when back offices of different reporting institutions and everybody is responsible and a counterparty with the others. I think our system works okay. I think we've seen a big fear in 1998 when long-term capital went broke and the value of that problem was like $3.6 billion, and companies in the industry came together to invest $3.6 billion to have it liquidate in an orderly manner. We just saw a company, hedge fund in energy, lose over $6 billion without hardly a blip in the market. Personally, I would feel more comfortable if we had one regulator that was given the responsibility for the reporting of all of the transactions that relate to everybody. And so what I'm saying is from the point of view of markets and derivatives and off-balance sheet transactions, if hedge funds had to report what they're doing, and banks and investment banks, to one common regulator that would understand everything that's going on, I think that would be a very good idea in this complex world.
But it would be a black box so that nobody else, the hedge funds would report in what they're doing, but nobody else could see it.
Well, that's true. My recommendation would be the Federal Reserve Bank would be, I think they're a phenomenal regulator. And I've learned that firsthand in being on the board of the New York Fed for the last 5.5 years. And, all the banks report into them now. And one bank doesn't find out what the other bank is doing. It doesn't work that way. Yeah. And I think a lot of the investment banks would be happy to have the same kind of reporting so that the information is all in one place. As it gets more and more complicated, I think that would be a good thing for us to think about.
One more out here.
What is your view on the increasing role of hedge funds in corporate America today?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think hedge funds obviously have a lot of money, and they serve an important function in that they've created incredible liquidity in the marketplace. Most of them have done pretty well. I would feel better, as I said just before, if what they were doing and their positions would be able to be monitored by a common regulator that is monitoring other financial intermediaries and institutions because they're all counterparties with each other, and there has to be, or should be, one central clearing place where this can take place. But you know, I don't think people should be just fearful of hedge funds. We've seen some bad ones. We'll see more bad ones. We'll see some good ones, but they should be monitored in a way that they're not stopped from doing business, but what they do is known.
All right, we're going to put you on a plane back to New York in a little while. You're going to tell them what's waiting for you on the airplane?
I have a little bit of Big Al's and whose?
And Sonny Bryant's.
And Sonny Bryant's.
So it's going to be...
And jalapeno peppers.
It's going to be kind of a contest, anyway.
It wasn't that I didn't love your food, but I don't get really good barbecue that often, so.
Thank you, boss.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Citigroup and Smith Barney, for sponsoring this. We appreciate everything you've done. For those of you who are looking to the forward calendar, please know that we have the ambassador of Pakistan coming in. We have the ambassador of Japan coming in. We have several CNN's correspondents. Since Labor Day, we've had the ambassadors of Afghanistan, Iraq, and now Pakistan. So do come. Thank you.